What about our work lives? What's it like in the office? What's it like doing your jobs every single day? And one of the great challenges I find, I work with a lot of organizations, both associations and direct companies, and one of the big challenges is that while all this cool stuff is happening in the outside of the office environment, there's the Duolingos and the Foldits of the world, in most offices it's still pretty much like a scene from Office Space, that movie, asking for the TPS reports and hanging out in your cube, and pretty kind of like boring environment. And I think that there's a core reason, and it's important to ask why things are this way and whether or not they always have to be this way. And in order to understand the why things are boring, we also have to understand a really important part of human psychology, and that's called habituation, okay? So habituation is the way that your brain gets used to things, that it gets bored of things, that it becomes accustomed to stimuli, that it turns down all the outside noise. And this is actually a very important evolutionary step for humans. Habituation, boredom, is actually really important because if you didn't get bored of stuff, so if you couldn't turn down the volume on every new stimulus, you would never be able to focus enough to get anything done, right? Right now, listening in this room, you would be constantly thinking like, oh my God, it's so cold in here. Oh my God, this person smells. There's a loud hum, right? All of these things are stimuli in the room. But magically, even though you noticed all of those things when you sat down at first, after a period of time, they fade away and you get to focus on the important thing, right? The guy standing up the front of the stage and talking to you and the things that you're learning. So this habituation skill is incredibly important for us overall, but the dark side of habituation is that it makes people bored of stuff pretty quickly. And my favorite example of this comes from research in Denmark. And these researchers were looking at couples and their relationship with each other because over time, the psychologists there had found that couples would come in and say, our relationship's not the same as it was at the beginning. We don't feel the same way, we don't act the same way that we do. So the researchers were like, is that normal? Okay. So they looked at like 15,000 couples, and what they found was that on average, after about year 2 in a relationship, couples shift from what's called romantic affection to companionship affection, okay? So I know this doesn't apply to any of you in the room, because this isn't what your relationships are like, but this is the average person, okay? The first 2 years are like, oh yeah, you are really hot. This is amazing, right? And then after year 2, waking up every morning, you're like, we are awake. This is great. Okay, so the point was this was normal. Okay, now put this, I'm just gonna put this out there. Just gonna put this out there. A sexual and intimate relationship with the hottest person you can convince to sleep with you on a regular basis without compensating them has, it's an important qualifier. It ruins the whole story if I don't put it in. Has a 2-year lifespan before it becomes everyday, normal workaday life. So what does a job have to do to get and keep a person's attention, to have them excited and enthusiastic every day coming in, day in and day out, if that's where our habituated brains are set? We love to talk about how young people can't focus on something because the phones and the games, But actually, this is not about young and old. This is not about young and old. This is about the brain, and the brain gets bored. And in order to keep things interesting, you've got to play to that part of the brain. You've got to say, we need to make things more dynamic, and things need to be reflexive to the person playing them. One size does not fit all. And so I want to share a couple of examples of companies and organizations that I think are doing this super well, and a couple of ideas, and I'll let you guys get to the rest of your lives. So this is a project that we worked on for a large consultancy, a big global consulting firm, and let me preface this by saying they are not an exciting company. okay? They're lovely people, but I promise you, they're no more exciting than any utility that you can imagine, okay? And one of the things that they needed to do was connect their global employee base, because they've got people all over the world, a couple 100,000 people, all different languages, all different ethnic backgrounds, all different cultural experiences, and inculcate them into the firm and teach them the different things that the firm could do and all the different capabilities of the firm globally. And so we built this solution called Globe Runner for them, which is basically a where in the world is Carmen Sandiego for the corporate set. Enabling them to travel around the world inside the company's framework and learn and adapt and understand the different things that the organization is doing. And to date, it is the best reviewed, the highest used, the most popular tool, internal tool the company has ever rolled out to its employees. There's nothing that even comes close to the popularity of this. And we're talking about in countries like Saudi Arabia and countries like the United States and Canada. So we're talking about places where there's vastly different cultural appreciations for these kinds of corporate interactions. Another one that I especially like from Delta Airlines. So many of you, of course, know Delta, and a number of years ago, Delta decided to onshore their customer service again and realized they had to train a bunch of people. And needless to say, the American education system doesn't do a great job with geography. And geography is a big thing if you're running an airline. So they had to train a lot of people on a lot of stuff that they just didn't know a lot about. And so Delta said, well, look, there's just no way we're going to be able to do this the traditional way, the corporate training way, So they built these games called Ready, Set, Jet, which are little mini games that you can play to learn about the Delta way, the Delta reservation system, and worldwide geography. And in the first year of Ready, Set, Jet at Delta's like 140,000 employees. In the first year, Delta employees did 4 years worth of training in 1 year using Ready, Set, Jet. Now, I know because you guys work in a regulated environment, you have been in corporate training before. Now I want you to think back to it. Is there any corporate training that you've done where you've been like, I'd like to do 4 times as much of this as we just did? This was amazing, right? Right? Most corporate training is like, okay, everybody, we're here today. Do not sexually harass anyone. Sexual harassment is bad, right? Do not blow up the plant. That would be bad. Okay, so it's like, this is really a huge shift. And the coolest part about the Ready, Set, Jet story, the coolest part, is that the top 2 players in Ready, Set, Jet are 2 like 50-something women who live in the Midwest. They're far and away the dominant players of Ready, Set, Jet. And they start every day with each other like, hey Marge, hey Susan, how's it going? They can talk to each other in the game. And they're like, I'm gonna kick your ass today. Seriously, it like pushes all their buttons, it's really cool. The other interesting thing about Ready, Set, Jet was that in that first year of operation, the game was not playable during working hours. So it was an optional activity that you could do of your own volition. So that is how high the bar can be set. You can take corporate training from literally the least good thing a company can do to literally the thing that the employees most want to do with their day, simply by thinking of it through the prism of maybe my employees are not prisoners of my company. And maybe we can build something that's gamified and interesting. And the other quick story I want to tell you is about the implications of big data and employee reviews. So one of the things that some really advanced companies like Spotify and Facebook have done is they have completely done away with the annual review, right? Because annual reviews are maybe next to corporate training, the least amusing thing that you can possibly do with your time, right? Most annual reviews are like, they totally feel like you go into your boss's office, right? And your boss has like shown up, you haven't probably seen him or her for a while. And they're like, okay, let's talk about your year. Here's everything you did in the last 2 weeks that I remember. That was pretty good. You're a pretty good person. Here's one thing that doesn't make any sense to you, but that's my complaint, because I have to have one thing. right? Even though I don't know you at all, I've got to have this one thing on the review because I can't give you all praise. I have to have one thing. And here's your raise, which was already agreed upon before this conversation. You can't negotiate it, but just thought it should be connected to this conversation in some way. And I'll see you in a year, right? Like that's mostly it. And from the manager's perspective, it's like, oh my God, annual reviews are the worst. Oh my God. It's like grading papers for teachers. It's like, oh my God, I can't believe I have to do this. And so you put it off and you put it off and you don't remember anything. Frankly, the whole system is broken, right? So the idea, the gamified annual review, the way that it works is everyone in the company has an app, and you can just like praise someone for little action. So basically the premise is every little good action that a staff member takes, whether it's your subordinate, your boss, or your peer, you just like quickly recognize them in the app for that action, right? Like, hey, thanks for getting us coffee. Awesome work on that presentation. Good job not melting the plant down. Love those TPS reports, right? Okay, so you can like, boom, boom, boom. You just give people recognition. And the idea is, instead of there being a giant data funnel that leads to a single interaction of great weight, what happens is we shift to a small amount of feedback, little bits of feedback every single day for all kinds of actions inside the organization, things that should be recognized, okay? So not testing people in a giant test process, but instead a constant process of small tests and small amounts of feedback that in the end result in a large scale change in behavior. And it's been such a significant effect that many of these companies have seen nearly 100% uptake in these reviews when they're given to employees optionally. And one of the things that also comes up a lot in this conversation, you know, I've been talking a lot about millennials and Generation G and younger people, and that's been one of the central tensions of your meeting here, is this like young versus old divide. But everything that I've talked about today, all the stuff that I've talked about, applies equally to older people as it does to younger people. It's not like older people don't want feedback in a timely fashion. It's not like older people don't want a progress system that makes sense to them. It's not that they don't appreciate fun and games. I mean, like, we're on a golf course. Golf is a game, right? It's a game. Frequent flyer programs are a game, okay? Basketball is a game. It's not like old people don't like games. That isn't how this works. It's more so that they just don't have the same expectation as millennials do about what their lives should be like. And even as they're frustrated, I remember my parents frustrated with their careers, frustrated with advancement and the way that things worked, they just didn't think they could or should speak up. And so it falls to the younger generation to speak up, as has always been the way of young people. You have to speak up. Your pressure is what changes things and what makes things kind of work better. But what's interesting about the millennials and what's different about the millennials from previous generations, you knew I was going to get to this, what's different about the millennials from previous generations is that instead of just bitching about your company and bitching about the industry and posting about it on social media, all of those things being things that you might reject, what millennials do when they don't like the place they work is they go out and start a competitor. That's what they do differently. That's what they have in common.